Start the show. Welcome back to Wrestling Chat with Friends, our Thursday show tonight. I am EJ the Collector. Thank you for the privilege of your time. I am joined, as I always am, by, look at him now. This is my tag team partner, the Cody to my Seth, the Rock to my Roman, the Tommaso to my Johnny. TG, how's it going, man? Good to see you. Been a long time.
It's going okay. It's going okay. Excited about the build to WrestleMania.
Hasn't it been
Very well
awesome?
done. Yeah,
Hasn't it been
very well
awesome?
done.
We have been away for a while, real lives get in the way sometimes of this fun wrestling podcast, but I hope everyone, including you, Tom, has been doing well the last several weeks. And yeah, what hasn't been enjoyable about this build up? I mean, we were talking a few months ago how hot WWE was, coming off Survivor Series. They had Punk back, they had Orton back. We didn't know. We figured we had lost The Rock back to Hollywood, and man, lots of things have changed
Yeah.
since then, but especially in the last few weeks. There's a lot to talk about. This very well is going to be most likely our WrestleMania preview show. Spring break next week kind of has a lot of us out of town, so we're going to talk mostly about the match card for WrestleMania, give our thoughts, give our predictions. But man, let's just talk about what's been the most hot in the last few weeks. I checked, one thing I did check today, I checked The Rock's IMDb page to see, like, does this guy, like, not have anything going on? There's no way the biggest star on the planet has nothing going on. He's launching a football brand, but, like, who knows? Like, all it really looks like is he's got Moana 2 in production right now, which is mostly voiceover. Doesn't have to be on location anywhere for a while. And I'm just sort of, if you had to ask me right now, I'd say kind of during the strike, when he first started having conversations with maybe Paul or whoever it was, and the Endeavor deal was coming together, he might have just mapped this out saying, hey, right after when the strike ends, this will be my first commitment. I know I've got, he probably just scheduled this and he was able to commit to it when we were thinking, like, who knows what his commitments will be. He'll have to be on location immediately, but he has been, I'd say, pretty much full time the last few weeks, and his appearances, including Raw on Monday night, have been stellar. I know how much you have enjoyed it. I want to hear what you've enjoyed about it, but give me one thing, if there is one thing that's been a criticism about The Rock coming back, if you have one.
Oh, I mean, the only thing I would say that is a negative, if you want to nitpick, is I do think his presentation and his promo style, to some extent, is a double-edged sword. Because as much as I think a lot of people, myself included, have enjoyed a lot of the things that he's doing that really do feel like they're from another era, not 100% of the things from that era were good. It wasn't like everything then is good and everything now is bad. He has brought back a lot of things from that era that are good and better than, in many respects, what's on TV today.
The era you're talking about, I would assume, is the Attitude Era of the late 90s when he was flourishing.
Yeah, or even like early 2000s when he was a Hollywood heel and that stuff.
Mhm.
I think that there are some things that he has done in terms of the structure of the way he speaks that feels a little, I don't want to say antiquated, but it's like, some of the repetition, some like those sorts of things that I don't think are done as much now, that were very much done 20 to 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that is really just a tiny fraction of the overall package that he has brought back to WWE. And I also want to say, it's not just that he is leveraging aspects of performance that have sort of fallen by the wayside as they've shifted, as things have changed, the product has changed, the audience has changed, but it's also that he is a singular star. And there have only been a few people who really are one of one, as they say, in the history of wrestling. And he is one of those guys. And so here's a criticism that I think may be a little more germane than the one I just offered. The one negative thing, and it's just a negative you have to accept, is that because he's so good and he is such a big star, he is going to make some of the other people that you are featuring look worse by comparison, which is inevitable. That's just the price you pay. And I'll give you two quick examples, specific examples of that. The first is the first thing I noticed when he came out for the first promo that he did with the Bloodline, 4 weeks ago or whenever that was I was looking at it and it was awesome in every respect. But I was like, man, Roman Reigns is a big dude, and The Rock makes him look small.
There's been a lot of little brother comparisons.
Yes,
Yeah.
and both in a literal sense and then also in sort of a metaphorical sense, which I think that's okay because that can play into a storyline. And then the other person that I will cite is, weirdly enough, LA Knight. And LA Knight, as you know, some of the criticisms of him from people who weren't big fans of his ascent in WWE have pointed out that he's just sort of sampling The Rock and Steve Austin and doing, and I think that was a little bit unfair. But there also is sort of a thematic and tonal similarity between what he does and some of the Attitude Era stars. So the problem is that LA Knight in part rose to stardom in WWE because people were thirsting for crumbs from that era. So LA Knight is, methadone, and now The Rock is back and you've got the real stuff. And I think it's easy for people to kind of be like, oh, wait, this is the real thing.
Right.
And this guy's like, he's okay, but man, now that I'm seeing the source, I don't necessarily need sort of the reflection.
That example has definitely come through in sort of how LA Knight's been sort of seen and booked. And we'll get into that when we talk about his WrestleMania match, because he does have one. But yes, I think.
But one final thought on that. Yeah. I think wisely, the WWE creative right now, which is clicking on all cylinders, wisely, I think they are aware of that potential issue and have been very cognizant about keeping LA Knight away from everything related that The Rock is doing right now, which I think is smart for multiple reasons.
Yeah, I think there could have been an opportunity because really right before The Rock returned, one of Roman Reigns' last feuds, I guess this was the Saudi Arabia, was LA Knight, and there certainly was the potential, if they were going to keep LA Knight hot, if something else had happened, that he might have been more featured, and that could have really shown disparity if The Rock and LA Knight had a promo face-off, because LA Knight, as good as he is, would have lost that and maybe even further relegated, or have been harder to build him back up. I think LA Knight will ultimately be okay. But yeah. We'll talk about it. The promos, the face-offs themselves, that and there's still a SmackDown and a Raw before WrestleMania, which is a week from Saturday. So I'm sure we're gonna see there's
two SmackDowns. One tomorrow night. Oh well, I guess is the one a week from tomorrow? I forget. Did they do the Hall of Fame for that? I forget what they do now.
Yeah, that's a good point. It would be the night before WrestleMania.
Yeah, I think they do the Hall of Fame for that.
Yeah, that would make sense, right? Because I think they've moved the Hall of Fame a bit, but
I forget.
We'll check on. There are a couple of more TV tapings, so what I'm guessing is there's definitely going to be. I am guessing that either tomorrow on SmackDown, most likely, maybe on Raw, there will be some receipts potentially paid because The Rock delivered a Attitude Era style beatdown of Cody Rhodes on Monday, at least for the time being. And or let me get your thoughts on this. Do you think it's something new going forward, or is this a one-off thing that PG is sort of being taken off the table for this Rock Bloodline Cody angle? Because we have seen curse words, even though they're doing their best to bleep them out. We're seeing some more coarse language, and we're seeing blood. We saw a lot of it on Monday. Do you think this is just sort of a special thing for The Rock, or is this a preview of what the future might hold under a Netflix umbrella?
Well, Netflix, I think, is a different question. I don't. Right now, I am very convinced that TKO wants to keep this product PG, at least for the time being, as long as it's on. Certainly, as long as it's on cable TV and broadcast TV. Beyond that, I mean, Netflix may be different. I'm not sure, but for right now, yes, I'm very, very positive that this is something that is being special rules that are being put into place for, even more particularly for The Rock. And I think that part of that is evidence for that, I should say, is the fact that one of the stories that came out in the last couple of weeks in the wake of these, all the type of content that you're talking about, is The Rock is giving his basically scripts for his promos to Fox in advance to let them know, like, this is what's going to be in it, not for approval, but so they will know when to bleep stuff. And I feel like if there was a concern about the rating of the show, meaning I should say, if there was a desire to change the rating of the show eventually to TV 14, I don't think they'd be worried about that. I'd be like, yeah, this is the foot in the door, and we're moving to TV 14. I think it's specific to The Rock, specific to this feud, to a lesser extent. The question of what they do when they go to Netflix, I think that's an open question. But I don't think what they're doing right now is necessarily a reflection of what they eventually will do. They may be more of sort of adult content. Adult content's the wrong term, but it'll be a more fewer content restrictions when they go to Netflix. They may make that decision, but I don't think it's a decision that they're making right now with USA and SmackDown.
Two more things before we get to the card itself. And they both have to do with sort of The Rock and the Bloodline storyline. Maybe my one criticism, and I think it's a small one, but I don't connect with the title Final Boss. I don't get it. Like, I mean, I get it. The Rock has some sway with Endeavor, TKO, but like, Final Boss doesn't seem like the greatest catchphrase, tagline, name that they can use. I don't get why that's being so heavily done. Unless it's the counter program Mercedes Moné and AEW, which why would it? There's no reason to.
I don't think it's. So where I think that comes from, and it is a little bit.
It doesn't work for me.
It's a little bit inside, which is why I'm not surprised they did it. But to your point, I don't think it's something that immediately resonates with people who don't follow this stuff like on the internet. So where this idea comes from, obviously, Final Boss is in part a reference to his status as being on the board, but more generally, it's a reference to like video games. When you get to not the level boss, but the last boss in the game.
I'm not a gamer enough to have gotten that much insight about it. Okay.
But that's not the inside part. The inside part is because people who are aware of video games are going to get that terminology. The inside part is a couple of years ago when, and I think maybe even in the early days of this show, there was this definite momentum for you'll remember that Roman Reigns was basically going through a who's who of current and past top stars. And just as they were building him up to be like, not just a champion, but like the biggest champion of this era and the biggest champion since Hulk Hogan, and maybe even eventually, depending on what happens, surpassing Hulk Hogan's record. WrestleMania, he pins both Daniel Bryan and Edge. He squared off against Randy Orton at some point. Mm-hmm. Kevin Owens, obviously Bray Wyatt in the initial match, although he pinned Braun Strowman. But then he was going through like, he would do these things where he would imply like, I've beaten everybody. Oh, crap. Then Cena shows up and then he beats Cena. Oh, I've beaten everybody. Oh, crap. Brock Lesnar shows up. And so during that run, there was this idea that like, he is just leveling up. But the final boss at the end of all this is going to be The Rock. And at the time, I was like, all the things I've said on this show before. I love the idea. I love it. But man, the last time The Rock wrestled a match, and we'll talk more about this in a few minutes, the last time he wrestled a match was like a real singles match was 2012, I think, if my math is right. Again, the rematch against Cena. And in that match, like he suffered some, not like debilitating injuries, but like injuries to where it would have been a problem for like, if he was about to go into production on them, they would have had to delay the film.
Right.
And that's 12 years ago. He's much older now. He's well into his 50s. So my point was at the time, it's a fun fantasy, but how realistic is it? Really? So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, I think, for wrestling fans, sort of a fantasy booking type thing. Well, then when he came back, it's like, oh man, it's going to happen. And I think Brian Gewirtz embraced that and came up with this idea, like, let's really play into this. But the interesting thing about that, and this I think is a signal to the audience or the people who have like followed this all along, it implies what I think we all suspect, which is eventually he is going to square off against Roman Reigns, and that's a given, of course. But it really confirms it, because that final boss nickname is not really directed at Cody; it's directed at Roman.
That right, and that leads to the other question I really had was, when in the fall, when this first started happening and the possibility of The Rock coming back, everyone sort of agreed. You certainly put it out there that if you have the opportunity to do Rock versus Roman, sorry Cody, sorry anybody else, this is the best option, is the best, you have to do this. That looked for a hot minute like it was going to happen, but maybe that was never the plan. Maybe there was an injury that forced a lot of things to be rethought of quickly. Looking now a week out of WrestleMania, we're not getting Rock versus Roman next weekend. Is that okay, or is it still lacking?
The way that I think that they really did a good job pivoting. The bigger picture question, like if it's January, if it's still January, the bigger picture question of, okay, how do we do this? I think that is still a valid kind of debate to have. But I think there can be very little debate that, given the fact that they ultimately decided not to do Rock versus Roman as the main event, they have built what they have, in as smart a way as possible. And by the way, I think even to my, like I was proven wrong, because one of the things that I said was the one big obstacle to doing what they actually wound up doing, which was night one, you have Cody in the main event. And then night two, you have Cody in the main event against Roman. My point was, whatever configuration you're going with, with so much talent on the roster, to have multiple spots in the two main events occupied by the same people. In this case, you got two of the same people in those two spots. I just felt like that was something that potentially could be counterproductive, whether it's from a business standpoint or sort of internally, like backstage morale, etc. I was wrong about that. They did it, and I think they've done it in a way where, unless you are really sort of biased towards another talent or outside of that main event scene, you'd be hard pressed to make the argument that they have done this in a sort of less than ideal way. I think they've done a fabulous job creating this, and I'll save the next comment for when we talk about the actual card.
And I'd say to that also, I think, and thanks in part to CM Punk's injury, there are now 3 superstars who are pulling double duty
right
next weekend, with Seth Rollins being in the tag team match. And let's talk about the tag team match first. We're going to look at the card. We're just going to give our thoughts and our predictions. These we'll start at the very top. Night one, Saturday, there's going to be Cody and Seth, who put their differences aside for now to take on the Bloodline, which is The Rock and Roman. There are rules to that. If Cody and Seth win, the Bloodline will not be present on Sunday for Cody versus Roman. If the Bloodline wins, it's going to be all Bloodline all the time. Cody will have that many more hard times to overcome on Sunday if he's to take the title. I liked how this match has built up. Each of them have been featured. I mean, if anything, Roman has had to do the least amount of work. Cody's been an ace.
That interesting?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
The Rock has been just such a treat to have the last handful of weeks. Cody is obviously the number one star in the company for a lot of metrics. And I'd say kudos mostly to Seth, who probably, not 2 months ago thought his WrestleMania plans are going to go one way, and he's been, asked to do all this, and there's not a better soldier in WWE, in my opinion, right now than Seth. Man, who's going to turn on who, and how's this one going to turn, and how's this one going to end up on Saturday? And this will be Seth's main event, because Seth versus Drew is not considered a main event, which is weird.
Yeah.
World champion, he almost didn't get his main event, but he's even promoted himself in the last 24 hours online, saying, 12 years ago I said I would head on WrestleMania. I'm about to do it, and you are, not by yourself. It seems like you were for a minute against Drew, but nope, you're not. But still, you are still main eventing. This is the night one main event. Cody and Seth versus Rock and Roman with stipulations. How do you see it going down?
I think if I'm so here, this may be an unpopular take, but in my mind, saying main event of night one is kind of like saying UVA wise. It's technically correct, but it's like
that's right.
Come on. I mean, the real one is. And
there is one main event to an event, and that is the last match.
Exactly. And you can make an argument, because you're like, but it's 2 days. It's two separate things. And that's fair. Sure. But what's interesting to me is, by some measures, Seth Rollins will have now been in 2 WrestleMania main events, and probably deep down inside, by Seth's measure, he's been in 0. Which is that's another sort of
and one of them is like one of the biggest WrestleMania moments, in history.
He ended WrestleMania as the world champion with the title on the stage, and he still felt like
over Roman and Brock,
right? And he still felt like it wasn't what I wanted, which I actually respect. Yeah. So to answer your question, anything is possible. And this is what I'm most excited about this WrestleMania, is that the way they have built it, I feel semi-confident about what the results will be, like who is winning these matches. Mm-hmm. I have 0 confidence about how we get there. And that, to me, that's enough. That's fine. Sure. So I think the night one main event, I don't think anybody turns, but only because we have this night, all the stuff that's going to happen on night 2, where everybody involved in the match, except technically The Rock, has another match. But this is why I think the Bloodline wins, because I'm like, are you really going to not have The Rock be there for night 2? Are you really going to not have the Bloodline? Like, after this story that you have been meticulously constructing for 3 years, you're not going to have these dudes involved in that show where it potentially all comes to a head. Come on. Who are we kidding here? I will say there is one potential crazy scenario that I'm going to throw out for you, where, what I've been clamoring for is opener for night 1, Jimmy versus Jay. And then after the match, like, Jay wins, I think. Mm-hmm. And after the match, there are some kind of overtures made to Jay to get him back on the, because my thing is, I've said this, like, seriously, what would be really cool is if the Bloodline is all back on the same page when things truly come to a head. Okay. So there's a couple of different ways you could do that. You can have it be like a night-long storyline, like it has been on certain pay-per-views, where you get little backstage vignettes that lead up to this. And Jay, it's clear that going into night 2, Jay he's with the Bloodline. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to have Cody and Seth win night 1. And of course you do some kind of probably injury angle with Seth, and then that leads, that creates intrigue for night 2 for his title match. And then it's like, all right, Bloodline is banned. I still don't think that happens because, again, The Rock, you've got to have The Rock there. But Bloodline is banned. And then if you wanted Roman to retain, how do you do that? Jay. And then the Bloodline is all back together by the end of the show, with Roman retaining the title and breaking Hulk Hogan's record. Do I think that's what's going to happen? No. What I think is going to happen is pretty straightforward. Night one, really fun tag match. Probably, I'm deciding who's going to get the pin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say it's The Rock, and Roman is a little annoyed that The Rock is the one doing the pinning, and Rock pins Seth. That's what I'm going to say. They're not going to pin. I'd be very surprised if they pinned Cody the night before, but who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I kind of think they are going to pin Cody just because in 24 hours he's going to stand tall in the end, so this is okay, and no one will remember
That's
that.
true, and I think Seth's going to lose. So yeah, it would actually. Now that you said that, I think you're right. I think that's smart. I think it would make more sense, especially after the beatdown that Cody got, to have Rock pin Cody, and then that's kind of hanging out there.
Just put every hard time there is up against Cody. It seems like that's where they're going. As much as I would love to see Seth turn on Cody and have that be sort of, I mean, that would be a surprise to a lot of people.
I would love that too.
I would love that. The only reason I don't think that's happening is in 24 hours,
you can't turn him back the next day.
He's the clear face over a super heel, Drew McIntyre.
Yeah, that would really screw that.
Who is likely to win and then go on to feud with a super face CM Punk. You know, any dreams we're having about getting a heel CM Punk when he returns, not happening yet. Drew's done such a good job with this heel work that I think
Punk will turn heel when he feuds with Seth.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah. Right. So that yet another reason why it just wouldn't make a lot of continuity sense to turn Seth over Cody, even though that would be sort of the hardest thing of all for Cody. And you lose your partner. I'd also think the Bloodline will find a way to win, some shenanigans. You know, I hadn't given much thought to the J factor, but yes, I think you put the entire Bloodline back together if you're planning on having them stand tall at the end of Sunday, and I'm not predicting that right now, unless it looks like you're going to do that and you do another swerve and Jay costs Roman. Because remember, Roman's going to have to feud with somebody after he presumably loses the title on Sunday. If they go that route, Roman's going to have to feud with somebody for a while. You know, mixing up with Jay again wouldn't be a bad idea. But again,
I think who knows? I think that's obvious. But let's save that match for last because it is the last match.
So. Yes, let's save that. So let's then go to, so that will lead up to that match. So we had the Bloodline going over in this basically qualifying main event for the singles match on Sunday. So that will be The Rock's feature. He will be protected. You know, Roman will do the work. He'll get his moves in. He'll have some moves to him. Hopefully, Rock will not get hurt. And Moana 2 will debut in theaters as scheduled November 4th.
Unless he takes a shot to the vocal cords, I don't think the Moana production is going to be slowed down. But
that's right. Since we mentioned it, let's talk about Jimmy and Jay. You wanted to open the festivities on Saturday, which wouldn't be bad.
I think that would be cool.
This has been a match that like we have figured ever since they split, this was going to be the main, and it really didn't come together until just a couple of weeks ago. It was not. It has not been a deep. The story has had to be revisited. It's been a long story, but it really hasn't been touched on much until just a few weeks ago.
And this, again, I think is another thing that is a casualty to some extent of The Rock coming back, because I think Jay versus Jimmy, when we're at Survivor Series last year, but from that timeline, I think Jimmy versus Jay would have been a much bigger focus of the WrestleMania build absent The Rock's presence.
Agreed.
And in fact, it might have even, I mean, who knows? It could have been, a thing where they did night one, then Roman. Yeah, because it could have been like night one could have been Cody and Jay versus Roman and Jimmy or whatever. I mean, they could have done something similar, but with that setup. But I think Jimmy versus Jay has been something that, like you said, there were a couple of hiccups in the overall storyline there where we talked about this on the show, but like stuff kind of didn't make sense. And they had to kind of like do some light retconning to fix, because like, wait, who asked who to leave the Bloodline? Like, how did that go down?
Right.
Like, because Jimmy was the one who they were having problems with first, and then he kind of pulled Jay out, and now it's kind of been retconned where Jimmy was the loyal one, and I'm like, I remember different. I know they're twins, but you can't really fool us.
Right.
So I do think Jay wins simply because they have really positioned him as a much more protected singles wrestler than Jimmy has been. And it would be, unless there is, again, the one scenario where I think Jimmy wins is if there is something that connects to the larger story they are telling over those 2 days involving the bloodline. But otherwise, Jay wins.
They've yet to really release Solo to a singles career. He's still been at Roman's side, and there's no reason he won't stay there until they're ready to maybe let Solo and Roman go at it. I'm sort of thinking now that if and when the bloodline really does sort of implode and Paul ends up disassociating with Roman, it might be for Solo. Because I think Solo does need a mouthpiece. Maybe he doesn't, but we really just don't know because he doesn't say very much anyway.
Did you see the shot in the background during the backstage promo on Raw where
was
Paul
that
Heyman
who was he talking to?
Drew McIntyre.
It was Drew. That's what I thought. That's definitely interesting. And since we're talking about that, let's move to the other world heavyweight title match. It's called the B title, but man, I enjoy Seth Rollins as much as anybody else. But
I think this is the best work of Drew McIntyre's career.
I think it's the best work of Drew McIntyre's career as well. And Seth has been the only holder of that world title, and it's been a long time. And I think the circumstances are just ready for a change, mostly because there is another key player who's not in the match, but I think WWE has enormous plans for CM Punk over the next year. If they were to, I don't even like bringing it up, but we'll talk about it. That face off with Seth and Drew and CM Punk popped an extra 500,000 viewers on those metrics. CM Punk is undoubtedly probably more of a marketable star than Cody Rhodes in some ways. He brings in all those eyes. I think Cody is going to be their signature star, but man, CM Punk in WWE has been a game changer, even with his injury.
How crazy
is eyes to the product.
How crazy is it? The additional audience that his segments get is larger than AEW's total audience for a lot of their shows.
For 2 out of their 3 shows, no doubt, and creeping up on their 3rd one too.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
Just really quickly to go back to Solo for 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
We've joked a lot about how the Saudi Arabia shows are non-canon, but look at like the 2 biggest matches on the most recent Saudi Arabia show. You already talked about it before, but LA Knight lost to Roman Reigns. It's like that never happened.
Right.
Solo Sikoa squashed John Cena. It's like that never happened. Like Solo doesn't even have a match at WrestleMania. Anyway,
let's put a pin in that too, because before we get through these matches, there are a lot of wrestlers who have yet to be booked for this card. But they may or may. I'm sure they will be, but Solo doesn't look like he's going to have an actual match. But he'll certainly factor in.
He may sing the national anthem for the main event.
He may sing the national anthem. Seth and Drew, do you have Drew capturing the world title?
I do. I think the interesting thing here will be 2 things. One, will there be some kind of angle coming out of the night before? Because as we know, Seth's coming back from an injury, and then there's the question of, is Drew maybe going to appear after that match and mess around with Seth and yell at him like, you shouldn't have taken your eye off the ball. You should. It's what he's been saying the whole time. I do think Drew gets his moment in front of a crowd. I do think he wins. The interesting thing would be as Drew has been on this kind of trajectory as a character, which again I think is the best character work of his career. The common thing that keeps coming up is he somehow finds a way to not win. Whether it's in the end, whether it is because of, it was outside interference from the bloodline. Then it was him kind of being his own worst enemy and doing certain things in matches that wound up costing him the match. And I'm just wondering would they sort of continue that theme with a Damian Priest Money in the Bank cash in? And he gets his moment, he wins his title, and then he loses it, 2 minutes later. I don't know. I don't know, but I think it's a possibility. But I definitely think Drew wins against Seth.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
just sort of occurred to me when you talk about that, when you mentioned the backstage, the segment that with Drew and Paul Heyman in the background. What would just add more excitement to a Drew McIntyre CM Punk feud than CM Punk's old spokesperson
Yeah.
Paul Heyman in the mix? Seems like that is almost built for that. Um, interesting because Drew doesn't need anyone speaking for him. He's great on the mic and doing the best work of his career. But yes, that is interesting. I agree. I think Seth's going to lose. I think Seth's on to something else that doesn't involve, but they're going to eventually work their way back to Seth and a world champion CM Punk at some point down the road too. So I have very little concern about Seth's future because he's doing great.
Great.
Let's talk about Seth's wife for a second. Another championship title. Rhea Ripley, man, who people are calling the modern day China. I think she's doing the best work of her career. She has been the number one star featured on TV for the last, God, at least 12 months. But she's facing the man who has held that title for a few years before Rhea really has established herself as the top female on the roster, and they're squaring off. This is like a WrestleMania dream match. Man, could be worthy of a main event if you ask me, considering how these two have fared in the last couple of years. I'm having trouble getting a read on this because I do feel like it's not going to be a great weekend for the Judgment Day as a whole, but I think someone has to emerge dominant from the Judgment Day to maybe start making some executive moves and decisions about who stays and who goes. And I think that would be Rhea. So having Rhea retain doesn't seem at all out of pocket considering, but Becky has, just released a book, is basically being shown as the female face of the company to everybody else, with coinciding with her book release, her book tour. She was on Today's Show. She's going to be going everywhere. And it would seem very normal for Becky to recapture a world title, which has eluded her for a while at WrestleMania. But I think Rhea's going to somehow retain and end up strong. And again, we've seen that Becky can lose these matches and be okay because Becky is sort of firmly a WWE legend superstar. She's earned it. She's one of those ones now, unlike some others that are there that benefit from a title. I don't think Becky gets it at WrestleMania. I don't know how it's going. I think she will be left. She very well may get it back at Payback at the following PLE but I think Rhea's going to walk tall, stand tall at WrestleMania. Your thoughts?
I agree. I think that they really, to my mind, I think that Rhea Ripley is a bigger star, or at least will be a bigger star than China was. I think she is. It's because they have really, really strong top stars right now with Bianca and Becky, and of course, a lot of potential, maybe with Jade Cargill. And then a stacked roster with several other really great
Tiffany
performers.
Stratton, lots
Tiffany
of others.
Stratton, you've got Bailey, you've
Naomi.
got a lot of people. But I think that they see Rhea Ripley correctly as being part of that upper tier, and this is sort of, I think, the match that kind of cements her as someone who is at that level. And I think that the question I have about how this is going to go, because to your point, Becky doesn't need a title. She's a huge star. She'll win a title again at some point down the road. And I think that the other thing about Rhea is she is somebody who is ready to turn face. So to go back to your point about the Judgment Day, I'm not sure the Judgment Day survives as a faction after WrestleMania. I think there are a lot of different things that are going to happen. JD McDonough is neither here nor there. Dom
it's never really been confirmed if he's in Judgment Day.
Technically, he is. I think that they've said yes. I think R-Truth is more of a gray area, but yeah. So I think that JD's kind of neither here nor there.
Uh-huh.
I do. We'll get to this in a second, but I think we both probably agree the tag titles are going to change hands at WrestleMania. There's also the possibility of either a Damian Priest cash in, or what may be more likely is at some point he tries to cash in. Maybe, for example, if at the end of the night on night one, Rollins has been beaten down by either the Bloodline or by McIntyre, maybe Priest tries to cash in, and either McIntyre gets involved and then the rest of Judgment Day is like, you blew it, or Finn gets jealous if it's like a night two cash in and he tries to cash in on McIntyre and prevents the cash in himself, and then it becomes that sort of schism after they lose the tag titles, etc. And then I also think you've seen Dom have like some overtures with Andrade, and maybe Dom is going to be sort of spun off into a different thing. I hate the thought of Dom and Rhea separating because I think they're such a great act. But
Rhea was singing Andrade's praises as well a few weeks ago too. So I think there's a possibility to remain a package deal with Rhea and Dom if you're going to bring Andrade involved in it.
Right, and there is a possibility, a possible future where Judgment Day, even if someone like Priest, for example, winds up getting kicked out or something, that that faction continues to exist, and Andrade is brought in to be the replacement for JD McDonough or Priest or whoever they feel like needs to go, or whatever that angle is. I think there was a moment 6 months or so. It's hard to keep track of time in wrestling, but some time back, it really did look like they were building strongly to a Finn versus Damian issue, and eventually it got resolved by Rhea. And I think that at that point there seemed to be a lot of momentum to turn Damian face, because I think people were kind of getting into him, like cheering him a little bit. I think now that has died down. Like, I still think he's over, but I don't think there's not as much momentum to flip him as I think there is obvious momentum to flip Rhea, because she's getting a positive crowd reaction. So bottom line, Rhea wins, I think, as well.
Yeah, agreed. Before we go to the other women's championship match, since we talked about it, I believe also the tag team titles are going to come off the Judgment Day in some fashion. Again, we just finished talking about, we have no idea where it's going to go with Finn and Damian and the briefcase and the titles and JD and Rhea, but there's a couple of we got some options because it's a 6-pack challenge. There's still 2 teams to be determined, but we've got I just had it here. We've got the Judgment Day against DIY, surprising winners over the Creed brothers. They had really been pushing the Creed brothers on TV the last several weeks. Thought they might have a WrestleMania tag team title match. Not to be. It's going to be Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano.
Yeah.
The New Day, sort of a little bit of surprising as well to have them in this, but very popular tag team. Kofi and Xavier are always due and worthy of a WrestleMania moment. And Awesome Truth. This is a surprise that we've had. It's kind of a pleasant surprise. The Miz and R-Truth have sort of reunited and are a tag team again. And then 2 others. One tag team will be determined tomorrow, where the Street Profits will go up against, is it AOP, or was AOP already eliminated?
No, they got eliminated. Remember. It's
okay.
The Street Profits against A-Town Down Under.
Right. Waller and Theory, who, belong at WrestleMania, but I think you can have them in other capacities, like a Grayson Waller effect or something else. You can throw them together with something if you don't have them win tomorrow. Because I think the Street Profits, headed by Bobby Lashley, ought to be in this match. But let's put them both in the mix. Who do you see coming out as tag team champions for WrestleMania?
Well, I think, if I remember correctly, there's also another half of the bracket where it's Legado del Fantasma and New Catch Republic.
Right,
so
could be one of
those teams.
Were they going to have an NXT tag team also appear? I thought at one point that might have been a possibility.
I feel like they mentioned that at some point, but then they
right. I believe that Catch. What's their name again?
The Catch Republic, which is a dumb name. I don't know why they
Tyler
did
Bate
that,
and not Butch, but Pete Dunne. I love them. I want them to win their match because I want them in this match too.
Pete Dunne, whose real name is Pete England, and I'm like, guys, you're done. Like, why even change his name? Like, that's the name right there, Pete England, from England.
Let's say
Pete
doing? England and is in the match along with Street Profits. Who takes the titles off them? Because I'll just tell you, I think the way it's been received by the fans, I think we're actually going to get Awesome Truth winning the titles.
Correct. I agree with that. I think what's going to happen is Awesome Truth is going to win, and it's going to be probably like a short-term transitional title reign. And so the question becomes, what heel team is going to come along in a month and take the titles off of them, or maybe 2 months? I don't know, because it feels like it's not going to be Judgment Day for reasons we just talked about. I don't think they would do that. And then if you look at the rest of the field, I mean, you've got DIY faces, New Day, obviously faces, New Catch Republic, which is a team again that they're high on, and they're new.
I think you can make them heels easily, especially if you bring in William Regal to manage them, which I think they should do.
Of course, but the reason I don't think that's going to happen is just because, again, I'm imagining this is my premise is that they're going to be transitional champions. So you're not going to have, like, if you want to keep the titles on for 3 months, I do think you have time to flip them, turn somebody, build them, whatever. I don't think that's how this is going to go. So the only people, like Street Profits, they were a little bit tuners for a while, but I think they're clearly faces.
No, they're heels.
It's not going to be heels. Oh, I don't know. I would disagree with that. I would say when they were
with Bobby Lashley, you think they're the faces in that?
I think they're faces. They're tweener-ish, but like when they're wrestling the authors of Pain, and they were feuding with the Final Judgment, whatever you call them, like they were not the heels in that feud. They were the faces for sure. I just think that now I will say you could turn the Street Profits heels quickly because they were already halfway there a couple months back. You could do that, and I would be fine with that. But the point I'm getting at is the only heel tag team that is really getting pushed at all right now is, I mean, other than the Judgment Day, I mean, who is it? That's kind of my question, is where does because Pretty Deadly lost in the first round. They were heels. It's not going to be Legado del Fantasma. Like, it's not going to be Angel and Umberto. It's not going to be them. So who else could you have as a heel tag team who could take a transitional champion, take their titles in like a month?
Yeah, there's not one out there, but if I had a month to create one, building off the events of WrestleMania and building off a lot of the events that we've spoken about already tonight, Dom and Andrade.
Dom and Andrade would be interesting. I think that would be good, and I would be. It'd be interesting if Judgment Day still exists and they are affiliated with Judgment Day and they win the titles. Obviously, that would create some jealousy in the
face of lots of face teams like you're talking about. Is there a possibility Judgment Day somehow retains? And they've got a month till payback to let somebody else. I don't know.
I mean, in a match like that, anything's possible because you do have all those teams. I just think they've been building to sort of obviously. I'll put it this way: if they have the Judgment Day retain, the build and the whole thing they did with R-Truth doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like that they invested all that TV time in doing that, and it's just like, oh, they just kept the titles, and Awesome Truth was one of 5 other teams that were in this match. So I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. So I'll be shocked if they retain. I think it's Awesome Truth, and then I think you're going to have some heel team is going to get pushed for a month, like hard, or maybe the Street Profits turn heel, and then I think you get to them, losing the titles in somewhere between
Do you
a
think they're
month
even
and
going to
2 months.
bother replacing those titles, changing the name of them, combine them into one actual tag? They've totally
I'd like them split. I mean, that I think would be better. I don't know
they did
why. I
with
mean,
they refreshed like every other title basically except those, and those are still sitting there.
yeah.
Anyway, let's keep moving. Let's keep moving
Yeah,
along.
and
But what were you gonna say?
okay, yeah. No, I was just gonna say it is so it's weird what they've done with the tag titles, considering what they have done, seemingly done with every
Mhm.
other title, where they have gone out of their way to create like titles for every brand. Now, I will say they did do that with a women's title. They did, take the NXT women's titles and unify them with the WWE tag team titles. So they are seem to be de-emphasizing tag team
Yeah,
championships for
considering
some reason. But anyway,
the women's tag team champions don't have a match yet booked for WrestleMania.
yeah. Although I think that might be because Asuka's hurt, and there's a question about whether she's going to be good to go for WrestleMania. I think that might be why they're holding
I
off on
guess
making that call.
tomorrow
But
we'll decide it, or maybe there'll be some tournament because there's lots of female talent right now. There's lots of tag teams, and maybe they
yeah,
need to have some sort of tournament to determine that. But I would love to see
I
the
don't know.
Kabuki Warriors if they're able to. But let's move on. Speaking of Kabuki Warriors, the Bailey damage control story has been good. I think that might be a little overshadowed on SmackDown by The Rock, also taking a little bit off it. But
Yeah.
we were teased that we all thought Bailey would be kicked out. She was. We all thought Dakota would be the mastermind. At first, she was Team Bailey for like a week. That was the curve. That was a swerve. That was nice. Turns out she was, in fact, sort of behind it all and is leading damage control. Still feels a little odd, like having Asuka and Io and Kari as a unit I think would be great. I don't think Dakota is taking away from it, but I don't know how much she's adding to it. However, but she is still the leader. Is Io feels like time is ticking for Io because unlike Becky, well, Becky and Bailey are two of the biggest female stars WWE's had in the last 10 years. Other than Charlotte, they may be 2 and 3, 1 and 3. Bailey benefits when she has the title, and I think this face turn I think would be complete only if she walks away victorious this weekend. I think it's going to happen to you.
I feel very strongly that it will. I think that again, kind of the question about this is like, how do we get there? Because obviously, on paper, she's going to be outnumbered, and the question is, is for example, um, Bianca, who understandably has issues, but she's like, hey, Naomi, I was here when Bailey was doing all this bad stuff, and she was doing bad stuff to me, and so I'm not just going to turn on a dime and suddenly be her friend. Does Bianca come around and maybe she's a difference maker and kind of evening the odds in that match? We'll see. But I do think Bailey wins. I would love for Bailey to, as sort of a surprise at WrestleMania to come out with her old music and to signal that she's like
Not
fully,
not
fully
not
face
not
now, which I
happening.
think the
Going
crowd
cool
would be. I mean, I also don't think it's going to
would be
happen, but
would
I
be
would love
awesome.
for it to happen.
What's most interesting about this match
Um,
really is because of because of the announcement we got last week that Jade Cargill had signed with
yeah.
SmackDown. The winner of this match will determine the championship that Jade will be going after, seemingly sooner
Yeah.
than later. So how does that, play into it, if at all?
I don't think right now that it plays into it because I don't think, unlike the tag titles being sort of, I think, up for grabs in a month or two, I think Jade must have a lot of work to do to get to a point. Okay, she can work a singles match every week and we're fine with her on TV in a match every week. So I think maybe Bailey will be keeping that title warm for her, but I don't think it's not going to be soon enough that you really have to factor that into your decision about who wins this match. I don't
Agreed.
think.
Agreed. Agreed. You can still do a lot. All right, let's keep going. Triple threat match for the U.S. title: Randy Orton, Kevin Owens, Logan Paul going in as champion. Man, I did not think I would ever say these words, even seeing how great Logan Paul has been over the last since his debut, a year or two ago. We have sung his praises. He has outperformed all of our expectations. He's a legitimate wrestling superstar, no doubt about it. But man, he's facing Randy Orton and Kevin Owens. One is maybe one of the top 12 best of all time, and one has been WWE's bulldozer for over a decade. He's still going to walk out as champion, in my opinion, of all the titles that will change hands. And I think there will be some next weekend. The one I am actually most confident is going to stay on someone's waist is Logan Paul's. And I can't believe that's the case, but I bet you agree with me.
I would like for it to. I think in part because once this feud is over, I think that they want to get Randy Orton back into the main event feud for a world title. And so I think that obviously if he's the US champion,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes something you have to delay quite a bit. I agree with you. I think that, Logan Paul said something really interesting and it shows how much he gets the business. He was talking about the fact that, Prime is going to be the sponsor on the mat
Yep.
for going forward at
Yep.
PLEs. And he said, like, because there was backlash against it, like, oh God, the mat is sacred, blah, blah, blah. Like putting something on the mat is just, it looks tacky and it's not WWE. And he was like, we expected that. And he said it made perfect sense from a branding standpoint, not only because of the selling the drink, but also because, yeah, I'm a heel. Like, yes, this is all part of the larger plan. It helps the company, but it also helps my character. And I'm just like, yeah, he gets it. He's completely 100% a natural. And I agree. I think he wins.
And Logan's 100% legit because WWE wouldn't be doing all this if they weren't benefiting
Yeah.
tremendously also from
Yeah.
Prime, from Logan Paul. Like they get it. I
Yeah.
mean, there's not a lot of people in WWE who have, I mean, name me three people who have more exposure worldwide who are currently employed by WWE than Logan Paul.
I mean, to
The
non-wrestling audiences, The
just
Rock,
The
and
Rock,
that's it.
and that might be it. Logan
Yeah.
Paul. So like Logan Paul is never was a joke, hasn't been a joke, not a joke, legitimately important to the
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
because, like you said, he gets it. Um, Man, we have had the greatest intercontinental championship run of the company's history. We have debated on shows before, like who's worthy. Like I don't even. He's gone through everybody, even the ones who we thought this was going to be it. There was a few people he never tangled with. L.A. Knight in his prime. Could have felt right, but they were on different brands. But Gunther, man, has been dominating. He's facing someone didn't see this coming exactly, even though this guy got his WrestleMania moment last year, but wildly popular, even though maybe not as popular as he was last year at this time. I think there's been a decline in popularity for Sami Zayn. I think he knows it, but he has found himself back in it in one of the most important matches on the card all weekend. And man, it feels like it might happen because what they've been doing for the last few weeks is they've kept Chad Gable in this picture so much so that it appears as though they're getting ready to split Alpha Academy. Tozawa and Otis appear headed to NXT to tangle with their tag team titles. Maxine's kind of doing her own thing, hasn't been ringside for Alpha Academy matches lately, and Chad is taking on this persona of someone who wants to pursue this Intercontinental title in earnest, and he's had some run-ins with Sammy. He's trying to get in Sammy's head. That only works if coming out of WrestleMania, Sammy's the new Intercontinental champion, unless you're going to run it back with Gunther. I,
Can I?
I
Yeah.
I don't know. Please, because I cannot. I don't have a call for this one yet.
Here's what I think is going to happen
Okay.
in the build up, the remaining build up to WrestleMania. I think it's going to be kind of clearly established that Chad Gable is sort of this mentor is not the right word, but he's like advising Sami Zayn on like if you to beat Gunther, you have to do this, this, and this, and he's going to be in Sammy's corner for the match. because of course Imperium will probably be out there with Gunther, and and Chad will even like do some stuff to prevent shenanigans from Imperium as well. At the last moment, it's going to look like Sammy is actually going to do it, and Chad Gable will have a visible change of heart, like, oh no, it's supposed to be me. And he will betray Sami Zayn. He will turn heel. As you said, he's going to be uncoupled from the rest of the Alpha Academy.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be a heel. And what I think this might want, he's going to feud with Sami Zayn for a while. And then I think you could get, this is one possibility. I don't know if this part's going to come. I feel pretty confident about the first part of that. But I think what you could wind up happening is a annoying heel Chad Gable gets his rematch with Gunther at Bash in Berlin in August. And Gunther is the face and Chad is the heel, and they main event. I don't know about that last part, but I think the first part because it would be, to me. So here's bottom line thought on this. The person who beats Gunther for this title needs to be somebody that they really have, I think, big plans for. So I could see it being down the road, somebody like Braun Breaker. If they feel really strongly about that dude, have it be, Braun Breaker. Now, there's a complication because Breaker's on SmackDown, correct? Is that right?
SmackDown and NXT to some extent, yeah, still.
Yeah, and Gunther is Raw. So right. That's a hurdle. But my point is, it needs to be somebody, I think it needs to be somebody like that. And to your point, Sami Zayn's still very popular, but his trajectory from 13 months ago is not up or even flat. It's down. Now, he's still at a high level, but his peak was February of 2023. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I think Gunther retains. It's possible Sami wins because it's a big stage, and I do think they want to give Sami a spotlight, but I don't know, man. I just think Gunther's going to have. It would be surprising if Gunther didn't have a title going into Bash of Berlin, or if he weren't challenging for a title that he's going to win. And I think the only scenario where he's not the Intercontinental Champion and is going into Bash of Berlin will be probably a scenario where like Priest has cashed in and won, and then Gunther can beat him for the world title. And then it becomes, the main event picture on Raw is Punk when he's healthy, Gunther, McIntyre, and Seth Rollins. And those four guys.
Yeah, and they're going to have to. I mean, they're going to have to. But they're going to have to work Gunther into the world title picture.
He's winning that title.
Yeah,
if he has not won that, barring injury, if he has not won that title, he's either going to be the champion going into WrestleMania next year,
right?
Or he's going to win the title at WrestleMania.
Challenging for it, right? And that seems like this time next year, Punk will be world champion. Who knows though? Punk and Gunther, sure. There's a lot of talent out there that they're. I mean,
especially if Punk has turned heel at that point.
It's just another example of just how WWE is firing on all cylinders with all the great people they had doing great work. One last one real quick before we get to the main event. The main event, we didn't pretty much give our predictions because we've talked about that as much as maybe you possibly can. Two people who I think have taken very different paths to get to this match. Talk about peaking in 2023 that you mentioned earlier. LA Knight, man. I don't think it's all his doing, but man, he has dropped off quite a bit. I think this match he has next weekend with LA Knight, I think that he could look at that as a disappointment. It's not for a title. Hasn't been a very long build with this feud. It seems like two guys who are big names who just sort of didn't have a chair when the music stopped, and they put them with each other. They've had some interesting angles in the last few weeks. They went to the well with the old like home invasion angle, which has been done 1,000 times. Pretty cool. It's cool when it's done well.
I thought they executed it well.
It was done all right. AJ Styles is not the greatest thespian in the world. He's a great wrestler. AJ Styles is someone who really under the radar the last 12 months. He was out for many of those, but you wouldn't have thought that he was going to have a singles match at WrestleMania 40 against someone who was challenging for the world title, but a couple of months ago, who was arguably the biggest face in the company. not that long ago. AJ Styles, LA Knight. I I think LA Knight's going to win because I think there's still life in LA Knight to have him rebound, no problem. The fans still get really excited when he comes out. I don't think you need to do much to restart that engine. Where AJ, different situation.
Yeah, I think this is probably going to be the best wrestling match that LA Knight has been in since he's been in WWE by virtue of the fact that he's wrestling AJ Styles, who I still think is one of the 10 best workers in the world.
Definitely still get it
Uh,
done.
I mean, phenomenal, literally and brand wise. I think it'll be a good match. I do think LA Knight wins for all the reasons you just said. I do think they have plans for him. He's been, as we talked about at the top, I think intentionally de-emphasized a bit, or at least kept away from the main storyline because of sort of paling or looking pale by comparison when The Rock is there. But I think they have plans for him, and I think that he wins here and gets a nice signature win. I don't know what happens with Styles. I like Styles a lot. I think he is probably happily in the phase of his career where he's putting guy up and comers over, and he's more than happy to do that and remain in the upper mid card scene. Probably for the next. I think he said when he signed his extension, I think he said like this is probably my last full time wrestling contract. So
Yep.
I think he's fine to do that, and hopefully they'll have some more good matches to come against a bunch of different opponents.
Some people who don't have matches so far. We talked about Solo Sikoa. We talked about Bianca Belair does not have a dance
Bianca
partner yet.
Belair. That's the biggest surprise to me is Bianca Belair not having a match.
Naomi, I could see them tagging against Kabuki Warriors if you threw
Bobby Lashley doesn't have a match.
Bobby Lashley doesn't have one. Karrion Kross, and I mean, if the Street Profits don't win tomorrow, why wouldn't you have this Karrion Kross versus Bobby Lashley, this faction? They were building towards it, but
I think that's what happens. I think that they were mad last week that Street Profits beat them. They cost the Street Profits this time, and then at WrestleMania you have a 4-on-4 where it's the Lashley, the Street Profits, and BFAB against Scarlett, Karrion Kross, and the Authors. I think that's the match at WrestleMania. Fine.
Last two people I want to talk about before the main event who don't have matches scheduled yet. However, they were sort of brought back together within the last week and teased that it might actually happen. Dirty Dom and his dad do not have scheduled matches. Dom randomly shows up to cost Ray the match against Santos Escobar. Santos Escobar is fine. He'll have interesting feuds down the road with your Andrades and your LA Knights and whatever. But there's a specific reason Dom came out seemingly out of nowhere to screw his dad over is because you got to do it, right?
I mean, there's a lot of interesting things you could do. I still think the match for WrestleMania. I don't. Dom may not get a match. I think Dom may just be there, like in support of Rhea. Maybe they split up at WrestleMania. I don't know, depending on how that goes. I don't know if they'll have a match. I don't think that they're going to do like Ray versus Dom 2. But I mean, if they did, they could, have it be like a retirement match or a hair versus mask match,
hair versus career,
hair versus career, like whatever. But I think it's probably still going to be Santos. I like Santos a lot. I think he's a really good wrestler. I enjoy his matches. I think that's probably the match, but who knows? There's also a possibility that that's a conversation for down the road about what they're going to do after.
I'd love to see the Mysterios one more time. I hope tomorrow or
I want Dom to have a match. Don't get me wrong.
For sure. I want him to have an entrance. I want him to have another entrance. I don't care how it is. It won't be as cool as last year, but I just want him to enter and get booed. And anytime, he's not done with his dad yet, so why not run it back at WrestleMania? All right, man. We're 10 past the hour. We got let's do 2 or 3 more minutes, man. This has been talked about to death. We're happy that we got this match, considering all the possibilities it could have been. We've got Cody, we've got Roman. We both think it's going to be under bloodline rules, and The Rock will be out there, and the Soul will be out there. Jimmy will be out there. Hell, maybe even Jay will be out there. The new Hall of Famer, Paul Heyman, who knows what he's thinking about these days, and maybe where he's setting his sights on next. We're, I'm going to say exactly what I said last year, even though it just didn't happen. They're building it. This has got to be it. Cody's a signature star. If you didn't give it to him last year, everything they are doing, even with all this with The Rock, everything they are doing is suggesting Cody's going to stand tall tonight. So probably exactly why it's not going to happen. People are preparing to freak out if the Bloodline music is playing to close WrestleMania and Roman is holding that title and they're holding their fingers up. But I think Cody's going to actually win it because I just think this is just a reset. They didn't reset it last year, and they did gangbusters business with Cody as world champion, with a healthy Punk coming, with all their other stuff. I think it's okay this year to take the title off Roman. There's no shine off him yet, but he didn't wrestle. He didn't appear a lot in the last year since he beat Cody last year. I think it's going to happen. I'm thinking Cody's going to win. Am I wrong or am I right?
Here's the one thing I'm struggling with. Last year,
you called it.
I thought Roman would win.
Thought you were crazy. No way. But it happened.
This year, it just seems like if you have Roman win again, which I would love, don't get me wrong.
I know you would love.
But if you have Roman win again, it really does objectively, I think, potentially undermine Cody a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, they're super creative. This has been fantastic build. Yeah. I'm sure there are many ways that they could achieve that goal and not undermine Cody too much. But here's the thing that I keep coming back to that is the thing I'm having the hardest time with. In my mind's eye, I can imagine a lot of different potential ways that this plays out. But none of those ways achieve the goal of having Cody win decisively. You know what I mean? Like winning, yes, but it's the fact that we are both assuming this is going to be Bloodline rules, what that all means, the fact that we have seen some notes of the Attitude Era, and the Attitude Era, of course, and this was one of my issues with it, was every match was just here comes this guy, like just interference. So the fact that I think that may be where we're headed, in the same way that a Roman win potentially undermines Cody, I think if you're going to have him, this is what I would say if I were on WWE Creative 2 months ago. I'd like Roman to be the champion coming out of WrestleMania. However, having said that, if you're going to have Cody win, have him win. Like Roman losing is a big deal. It's a big deal. We have built this guy up for 3+ years. So if you're going to have him lose the title in the main event of WrestleMania, don't have it be because The Rock is the special guest referee and this Rock bottoms his cousin, and then Cody pins him. Like that's, or something like that, where it's like, wow, okay, so yeah, Cody's the champion, but
Cody needs to win as clean as possible.
He does. If he's going to win, that needs to be the way it goes. So the interesting thing is what shenanigans are we going to see? Because I can tell you, this is my final prediction on it. I do, gun to my head, I say, I think Cody takes the title off Roman. After that, I'm not sure what happens, but I think he takes the title off Roman. But this is what I will say is a more confident prediction than that. You are going to see no fewer than 8 people who are not the 2 participants in the match get involved in the match. And that includes The Rock, Jimmy, Jay, Solo. That's 4 right there. And then I think you will see
I've got some more too.
Seth will be somewhere in the mix. Macy, Drew somewhere in the mix.
I have one more.
Paul Heyman.
Well, we'll call Heyman too. And then I'm going to buy into some of the internet conspiracy theories that came out of The Rock's beatdown last week
And
against
that's the
Cody.
other thing I was going to throw into the mix.
John Cena and or Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh, well, I don't know if
They were the two.
they're more likely to get involved.
They were the two
with The Rock.
faces. They were the two faces on the truck in the background.
They're more likely to get involved with The Rock. What I thought you were going to say was MJF. Dare I say it?
Yeah, well, that would be the other one. No, I think if you have the opportunity to have a great surprise and above and beyond The Rock, again, nothing is done by mistake on TV anymore. So just giving those two guys in the background, I think
I for sure think they're going to be at WrestleMania. I think you'll see them interact in some way with The Rock. I don't think they would get involved in Cody versus Roman.
Well, I'd say it'd be more like what we saw last week on Raw, where at the end, this sort of Avenger style, Seth and Jay came to help and give Cody some backup as the bloodline is about to gang up on Cody. Can cause it. Nope. Here comes Cena and Stone Cold as Iron Man and Captain America to keep them at bay, so Cody can win as clean as possible.
It's too bad that my good friend Brock Lesnar is not available to also participate, because that would be great. So final thought, and then we can wrap up.
MJF would be amazing.
So that's my question for you.
Let
me give you a scenario.
Okay.
And I want you to say, like, okay, so scenario A is shenanigans, but ultimately Cody pins Roman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he celebrates with his family in the ring with the title. That closes the show. Okay. In terms of your like positive reaction to that, 0 to 10, assuming in all cases that they execute whatever this scenario is well, 0 to 10, how into that would you be?
7.5 to 8.5. Sure.
Okay, 7.5 to 8. I would probably be about the same place. Like, I would be. It's a great build.
If it's done right, sure, great.
Okay.
Great.
Scenario B.
Mm-hmm.
Shenanigans happen. All these guys show up. Everything we've talked about, and then right as it looks like finally, kind of like last year, right as it looks like finally Cody's about to win, MJF's music hits. And MJF comes out. Cody is shocked. Spear. 1, 2, 3. Roman retains. MJF smirks or does something else super cool. What's your 0 to 10 for that?
Oh, it's 1,000. Like that.
That's what I'm saying.
It's 1,000. That would be that injection of dopamine would be among the top one or two coolest moments in wrestling history for me. It's kind of like Punk's first return, kind of like Punk's second return, kind of like MJF's return as the devil. Like those have been some of the top moments for me. Bray's return the last few years. It'd be better than all those things but just for a moment, because then I would realize how much wrestling is screwed because AEW's screwed. You know, it would not be good for wrestling as a whole. But it'd be amazing.
The comments, by the way, that we're getting are very like, no.
I know. I still like AEW, so I don't want that to happen. If I didn't care about AEW, it'd be sick.
I will just say,
but I don't want that to happen for
those two scenarios. Are the difference between like polite applause, like they did a good job with this. That's well done, everybody. Great build, great execution. To leaping from my seat and being like, holy crap, what is going on right now?
It would be big.
And then you have them. Then you have them feud for a year, and then you're good. You're good. And then main event of next year. Somebody said in the comments, main event next year, Rock and Roman. Boom.
CM Punk's return at the end of Survivor Series was bigger than Bray Wyatt's return when he came back after being released. MJF's return would be bigger than Punk's return at Survivor Series. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing. But for the overall health of the business, I don't want that to happen.
I would be surprised. I still think he re-signed, and they're just kind of messing with us a little bit. I think he re-signed, and you know, and as Cheat said, Dustin, I know now, his contract goes beyond WrestleMania. So there was talk that they would allow him to be there, just not to participate, but just to be there, like as a family member, and that I think is off the table.
That's probably not going to happen either. But no, I mean the reports in the last few days are that He's still rehabbing his injuries, and he actually met with AEW officials in Boston after AEW show up there.
Yeah.
They just, again, he's been removed from the roster page. His merchandise isn't being for sale. I think that hopefully that's part of the AEW storyline.
I think it is.
I want him to remain AEW, but as a non-biased wrestling fan, there wouldn't be a bigger thing than have MJF come out there. It'd be incredible. Man, that was a fun hour. We just did it exactly an hour 20. If we're not able to get together next week to talk about anything happening over the weekend, we've covered WrestleMania. We'll definitely need to get together the week after WrestleMania to go over all this and talk about MJF as the next WWE champion, because that'll be, and the return of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and who ended up getting, we didn't even talk about it, but man, I'm hoping that the night after WrestleMania, or the Monday Raw after WrestleMania, features debuts that we haven't seen yet or we haven't thought about yet. I don't know what kind of free agents are out there they could sign, but there are a couple out there that could.
But Chiefs threw out Ricky Starks.
That's interesting.
I think Alexa Bliss is coming back probably night after WrestleMania.
Alexa Bliss. I think they've signed that New Japan star Julia. That would be a big splash, even though she wouldn't be very well known. But that'd be a signal that they're still going after big names who they're going to create, and we might see another Jade Cargill debut. So we'll talk about it all. Cheats, thanks, man.
His debut every year.
that was a lot of fun. Cheats, thanks for producing it. TG, thanks as always, man. That was a lot of fun. Folks, have a great week. Join our page on Facebook. Join our channel on YouTube. Subscribe to us on X at WCWF Pod. And we're going to start ramping up, having shows. We will talk AEW. We'll talk NXT, Trick and Mello, main event NXT next weekend. That's huge for them. I'm picking Trick Williams all the way. Other than that, TG, final thoughts? Opening night, Red Sox start in 40 minutes?
I know, God. Don't give me I will not make it to the end of that game, but yeah. I'm really looking forward to WrestleMania. I think this has been the best build they've done maybe since 30. Which is funny because that was another situation where they changed gears. But yeah, I mean, this has been a great build. Certainly of the last several. Certainly, definitely the best build since the pandemic, and maybe the best build in a decade.
All right, well, you'll be watching live, so we'll have our chat message open, and fans of our show, comment, give your predictions on our Facebook page, on our Twitter page, and let us know what you think. So until we meet again, I'm EJ, that's TG. We got Cheats in the booth, and we